Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to the podcast today. Today we have Blake Arold with us. He is an absolute stud when it comes to tech sales. He is currently a director of sales for Darktrace, one of the leading tech companies that I hear about a lot in my industry. Really, for the purpose of this conversation and the purpose of bringing in Blake, I like to bring in high performing individuals who are actually in tech sales currently, who can really evangelize what it means to be successful in the role and what it takes to succeed. So, Blake, thank you so much for coming today. I know we're speaking briefly about your morning, so appreciate you making the time. But yeah, how's your week been so far?
Yeah, no, thank you, Jay. It's good to be here. The week so far has been good. We actually just got a deal closed last night, which is exciting. And we've got a few more to kind of track down. So we're really just getting started. So,
Nice. Well, I guess before we dive into some of the meat and potatoes, I know I gave a brief introduction on yourself, but if you want to just introduce who you are, who you work for, and what you do, I think that'd be a great start to the conversation.
yeah. Blake Arold. There's no N in the last name. Very common mistake there. I think somebody took it out somewhere down the line in my family lineage. But anyways, yes, I work for Darktrace, director of sales. I have a group of remote account executives that are kind of all over the West Coast, and we basically go after commercial size accounts or SMBs. So we're kind of playing in the 50 to 300 employee space. And before Darktrace, I worked for several other companies, kind of in the tech startup space. I actually worked for Uber in college. I was calling drivers to try to get them to drive more for cash incentives. And then I made my way to Carvana, and I was there for about a year before anybody knew what Carvana was. And then I made my way into actual sales, where I was an AE at Houzz, Houzz. I was basically selling premium digital advertising space on our website to home improvement professionals. And then from there, I made my way to ADP and did outside sales, selling payroll and HR solutions. And then finally kind of made my way to where I am now. And I've been at Darktrace for almost 3 years.
Wow, that is a very, very impressive career. And for those of you who don't know, a lot of the companies Blake he was just mentioning are industry leading companies in their own right. So it's no surprise Blake found himself in another position with another industry leading company with Darktrace. And then I guess with Darktrace, it seems like you've had a lot of great promotions and quick upwards mobility. Can you, I guess, explain high level what your tenure at Darktrace has been so far?
Yeah. So July will be 3 years, and I started as an SDR. I came from multiple closing roles, but I kind of took that step back and went the SDR route at Darktrace. And we can get into maybe why I decided to do that. But I basically came in with a huge fire under my rear end, because I had actually left my last two sales jobs on a PIP at the end. When I finally decided that they weren't worth the squeeze anymore, sort of fizzled out. And I wanted to really see some sustained success, and I wanted to move up the ladder quickly. So I came into that role with that in mind. And it was fully remote. This is when the pandemic just started, which I think was one of the best things for me personally, because I tend to be a bit of a social butterfly when we're in the office. I can sort of kind of want to, be the funny guy and a little bit of the class clown. Like I get a little too involved in like the social dynamics of work, and being at home really allowed me to just focus really heavily and stay out of the kind of the gossip that is present in every company you could possibly work at, the water cooler talk, all that stuff. And I just wanted to run up the scoreboard. And so That's what I did for about a year, actually exactly a year as an SDR. And then I started asking management and, kind of like putting in the suggestion box with the company, like, hey, like, why don't we hire remote account executives? Why don't we go after more of this like SMB mid-market space and sort of break out our account executive team? And turns out that's just what they were thinking of doing. As your company matures, you tend to sort of segment out the industry verticals or the company size that you go after. And so I ended up becoming an account executive on our commercial team. And I was able to hold a bunch of my opportunities that I had as an SDR that were in that sort of 50 to 250 employee space. And I was able to keep those and now just own them as an account executive, which really helped me get a quick start as an AE. So I basically was like, look, I'm already setting 8 to 10 meetings a week, and I'm just going to like continue to do that. And I basically thought of my role as an SDR, but now I'm setting meetings for myself. And so I kept that intensity. And eventually, I started filling my calendar up so much that I really like couldn't even set 8 to 10 meetings anymore. Like that was just too much. And so I really started focusing on quality and really started to think about like, who is the most qualified, people to talk to, and how can I kind of suss that out on my initial phone calls and start being more selective with who I meet with. And so that allowed me to get in front of real buyers and, kind of couple that with running a quality like POC type process. I was able to close 10 deals for about $1 million in 8 months as an account executive. And it was actually like 994K. So if we're being real honest, it wasn't $1 million. I missed it by $6,000, which sucks. I won't admit that on my resume. You can come after me, anybody, if you want $6,000. And after that success, I just had the opportunity to run a sales team because we were growing really quickly. And I saw that opportunity as something that I've kind of wanted as a salesperson, to just kind of grow my career capital, grow my own skills as a leader and a coach. And so I did that. And now I've been running the sales team for about a year. So that's kind of where we're at.
Wow, that is so impressive. And there's so much to unpack with that. I think the one thing that I want to call out before even diving into like all your success and everything is it seems like you carry a strong level of humility with you. And I'm not even saying that because you admitted not to hitting $1 million on your quota. But I think a lot of people who transition into tech sales, there's a certain ego if they've already been a closer of some capacity that they don't want to get back into the sales development role. I guess walk me through your thought process of kind of humbling yourself to go back into that role for Darktrace.
Yeah. So I would say it was kind of a perfect storm. I don't know that I would have had that humility if the situation was different, but I actually left ADP after a year and a half without having a job lined up. I was sort of lost. The ADP kind of beat the sales like vigor out of me. I think I really just didn't like the industry. I didn't like some of my management. I had a rough territory that was really far from the office, and I had to be out there every day and then return to the office. So I was kind of just distraught, and it took a little bit of soul searching. I was kind of doing some odd jobs, if you will. I took almost like an internship at my uncle's company. It's a mobile security startup. He sort of mentored me and took me under his wing, which is really important. And I just needed to go make some good money again, which is all relative. And this SDR opportunity, the base was pretty decent for where I was in my life. And I knew I could go in and hustle and make, between 80 and 100K if I just, put in the work. And that was a lot more than I was making after I quit ADP with no job lined up. So I was kind of like, screw it. I'll do it. And one of the main reasons that I felt like it was still a net positive for my career is because now I was in cybersecurity, and now I was in a very high tech AI driven cybersecurity company. And I was getting out of this sort of like dinosaur industry, which is human capital management, your HR, right? And before that, I was in digital advertising. So these are just very highly commoditized industries where there's just not very much differentiation in the products you sell. And I couldn't see myself growing in those industries. It just seemed like a waste. Like, what are you doing, Blake? You don't want to go climb the ladder at ADP, like the oldest payroll company in the world. Like, go do something more exciting. So when I got it, to Darktrace, when I got that opportunity, I saw that they were, only about 7 years old as a company. They were, kind of disrupting the space with their like self-learning AI tech. And I was like, screw it, I'm going to go here and work as hard as I possibly can and see what happens. Because usually if there's a startup you can get into that's sort of like, Series C type level where they have funding, they have good product market fit, and they're in a growing industry, you can really rise with the tide if you do well and you position yourself well. And so I kind of knew that going in. And so all of that sort of made the SDR route just very feasible for me, even coming from a closing role.
Hmm. I love the perspective you have, because when you do your market research like that and you're like, okay, I'm working for a winning product with a lot of upside. They're pretty cutting edge and innovative. It really does kind of paint a picture of, what could my career be if I stick with this company, which I think it's so cool you did that. But I know for myself, it was kind of interesting because I joined Dell out of college, and I didn't know what door I was entering. Like, I didn't know if I was selling laptops, servers, data center equipment, like any of the above. And I do think there's an element of luck. Like, I entered through the data center side of the house. I've had a lot of quick upwards promotions, kind of like yourself. But something I try to educate people on, and I don't know if you have any advice on this now that you're more tenured and experienced and you're managing people, but what's the one thing you think people should know before choosing a company and product they really want to work for?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Um, I think the industry is the most important thing to start with because, and again, this is like one of my mentors in my life, close mentor, kind of taught me this, but the industry is like that base layer. If you're in a bad industry with bad margins, it doesn't really matter what you're selling. There's going to sort of be a roof to your success and your earnings and your overall job satisfaction. So I think before you even look at the company and the product, you want to look at the industry. And I can't tell you exactly where to go to find a good industry. I mean, you just got to use Google and maybe ChatGPT now, like do some research, and you can pretty quickly tell what the growing industries are. And I think even if you're not in a really fast growing industry like cyber or AI or like cloud solutions or something like that, you should at least kind of, if you want to go into tech sales, you should think about getting into infrastructure or like just the underlying tech that all companies have to use to do business in this modern world. So whether that's IT, whether it's cloud providers, whether it's data storage and data solutions, or cyber, or workforce productivity, all that stuff is going to be highly needed, and there's just going to be a lot of opportunity in that space for a long time to come. So I think that's sort of your base. And then when it comes to the company, I also think that you have to think about what you want out of your career, because you have to balance the risk to reward. If you're jumping in a startup, you're definitely going to be looking at a little bit more risk, but oftentimes it can be a little bit easier to get into more of a startup environment as a more green sales rep, because they need people as they grow, and they need people that are just ready to hustle and work hard. So like, for example, like you, Jay, you're at Dell EMC selling data storage solutions for enterprise. That's probably a tough role to actually to get into, even if you're somewhat experienced in sales, because like Dell can probably choose the best of the best. And there's probably not as much turnover at a place like Dell because you guys there's more stability in your business. You've been around for a long time. Like you have capital to pay well, and there's generally less stability at startups. So I think you need to think about your overall risk tolerance and just your personality. Like, are you going to go in and like, are you okay with not maybe having the most structure and getting into a startup and really grinding and just seeing how it goes? Or do you want to get into more of a big company that has their processes down with stability, and maybe not in your case because you've grown quickly, but maybe there's slower promotions at larger companies oftentimes, right? So I don't know. That was kind of a chaotic answer to your question, but I feel like you just need to think about your personality and really start with a good industry. And then once you look at the good industry, start researching companies in that industry and look at their growth, look at their funding, look at their customers, all that stuff, and know that the smaller you go with the less funding, like Series A, the more risk you're going to have for the company just not working out or them making a cut after 5 months in the role.
Yeah. No, honestly, I've never heard it explained that way, but you said it so well. It's like the industry's your base layer. And then once you analyze that, then you can really figure out, okay, what are my ceilings in each of those industries? And that's exactly right. And I think to your point, there's even some discrepancies between large companies like Dell or like a Series A, B, and C startup. And so it almost comes down to, where are you at in your life? What is your risk tolerance? Do I want to really get good at setting appointments? Because if that's the case, maybe I go to a lesser named startup where I really have to build sales skills, because I can't just say, hey, I'm calling from Dell, which everyone knows.
Right.
So there's a lot of things, but there's also a lot of equity upside within startups. Like I can kind of say at Dell, we don't have it. All the Dellionaires, they happened way back in the day. So no, I think that's extremely insightful, because one thing I like to teach people is like, what's the right company for you, right? Is that working fully remote? Is that getting more equity? Is that having a quick promotion path to get into field sales? Is that I'm not even fully sure tech sales is for me, but I'm going to join this company because after my first promotion, I can go into marketing, recruiting, or engineering, or any of the above. So no, I think that is a very, very good answer. And I think when it comes to something we're both probably passionate about, I think it is that upwards mobility. And whether we like it or not, maybe we're just wired the way where we like to do new roles. We like to challenge ourselves. We like to try out new things. But I think from your perspective, like, you've definitely had a really cool path. And so if you had to break it down, what skills do you think are most important for someone who's looking to break into tech sales? And if they don't have them, how do you think you could develop them?
Yeah. So, and would this be coming from sales in general, or is this saying like no sales experience coming into tech sales? Because it'll probably depend a little bit there, right?
Yeah, I would say let's just go with no sales experience, because so many people are looking to break in with just a college degree, some without even a college degree. And it's like, what are those core characteristics that make someone like yourself so successful?
Yeah. So, man, it's a tough question, because I have my path that, and some of it I feel like might be luck. It's hard to be, okay. The first thing I'd say is a layer of self-awareness to build. And it's kind of ironic, because if I'm like, I don't know what's made me successful, that's a lack of self-awareness, right? So I think the first thing you really should cultivate is that level of self-awareness. How do you present yourself when you talk to people? Are you a good listener? Like, are you able to like actually take in what somebody says and kind of think about it and not just want to be sitting up in your seat and jump into an answer and talk over somebody? And that's going to make you a very effective communicator, especially in interviews, because the first thing you have to do to get into tech sales is at least be a solid interviewer or interviewee and make a good impression and ask for what you want confidently in an interview. And I think a lot of that came naturally to me. I've always been a bit of a talker or kind of an outgoing person. So, there's a lot of different things you can do to kind of cultivate that skill if you're not like that. But the first one, self-awareness. I know it's going to sound really cliche, but developing some sort of meditation practice or mindfulness practice where you're just sitting with your thoughts and you're unplugging from your technology. That's kind of, I think, another foundational layer of being good at sales, because that's going to help you be a better communicator. And the next thing would be, at least in my path, I read a lot of sales books, and some of them were not very effective, but then, the other ones were. So I would say pick up the challenger sale, pick up, spin selling as kind of your, like the original kind of OG, type book. Go follow people like Bowtied Sales Guy on Twitter. Shout out to him. He I feel like really brought like frame and status into kind of the mainstream, if you will, which is Twitter. So I'd say really focus on self-awareness and start studying the game of sales. And I would get any job you can, even if it's not tech sales out the gates. I would get any sort of sales job that you can and do as well as you possibly can in that role, whether it's door to door, which is brutal. I did door to door. Actually, I sold home security, door to door in Denver, or even some sort of customer success role that comes with any kind of upsell, or anything that you can just leverage on your resume to kind of showcase that you hustled and you drove results and you have the fire and the hunger to move on to that next step.
I love that. Yeah, and there's so many things that contribute to being successful, not just in sales, but any role. And I think you really encompass that with kind of emotional intelligence, in a lot of ways, having that awareness you spoke about, which kind of relate into your second answer, which was mindfulness. And I think that's something that I see is kind of like I don't want to say a taboo topic, but I don't think people talk enough about technology usage, especially when you're in tech every day. And I almost have found that to be one of the most important things in order to be successful, because I notice one of the biggest killers of maybe average reps from above average reps is reps who get distracted a lot, and they're constantly checking their phone, checking their Instagram. And funny enough, when I was a sales development rep at Dell, I actually deactivated my whole Instagram account and all my social media, just so I wouldn't, have that distracting me. And it ended up yielding in really positive results. But I think that's something people don't really take advantage of in today's world. And I think from your perspective, I'd be curious to hear just kind of what your day-to-day looks like in terms of not just what you're doing at work, but is there anything you do on a typical day to also have that work-life balance, to unplug with either hitting the gym? Sounds like you might meditate for a few minutes a day. I guess what do you do to keep that balance for yourself?
Yeah. So most of the time, I'd say about 3 to 4 days a week, I'm lifting in the morning. I've got a few tough injuries, so I don't go crazy. As you can tell, I'm not some big dude, but I do get in the gym, I'd say most mornings. And that's kind of how I start my day. There is caffeine involved there for sure. And then I usually take my dog for at least 2 walks a day. And I think even if you don't have a dog, you should always be trying to get out and walk. whenever you can. If you have sun where you live, even better, get out in the sun. And so I'd say it's a mix of exercise in the morning, walks with the dog without technology. Actually, I used to be I just podcast after podcast after podcast, like I just ingesting as much information as I could, whether it was about finance and like macro landscape or crypto or politics or whatever it is, like nutrition, all that stuff. And now a lot more often I've been unplugging myself. I even go to the gym now without headphones, which sounds insane probably to people, but I'm in there shooting hoops as my warm up before I lift with no headphones. And it's extremely meditative. Just me and my own thoughts and the physical activity that I'm doing. And so all of that, right? Getting outside, going on walks, unplugging from technology is extremely important. And then another thing I do is I really try to optimize my diet and my hydration. I'm not perfect, but I can't even tell you just how much of an increase in energy and overall performance you have as a human being when you are feeding yourself good food. Like just whatever that means for you. You might, if you're vegan, vegetarian, that's great. I'm not. Like, I go after like steak and eggs sometimes in the morning. Like I'll pick up a ribeye at Whole Foods and make that to start my day. Or whether it's just whole foods and fruit and vegetables, stuff like that. It's had a huge effect on my performance throughout the day and my energy levels throughout the day. So I don't crash at 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon and just feel helpless like I used to. So I think all of that is very important in sales, especially if you are in a competitive role with a lot of work to do and an open ocean of opportunity. You really want to be focused and do that deep work for as long as you can throughout the day. And that's going to give you your edge, because if it's not you, it's going to be somebody else. So, as much as people may not want to hear it because it can be work to do, you really want to put time and effort into taking care of your body, because that will help you take care of your mind, which is going to help you perform well. So that's kind of what my days look like, especially working from home. I'm exercising, eating well, and doing as much as I can.
That's awesome. And for those of you who don't know, Blake lives in Arizona, so he gets more than enough sun than probably most of us, which, that vitamin D is definitely refueling him. No, but that is all great stuff. And I think maybe it was more of a different generation who they either didn't have the health education or would sacrifice getting work done over having that balance, but they go in conjunction with one another. If you're healthier outside of work, you're going to be better when you're on that field visit, visiting your customer. You're going to have better energy when you're standing up, making that sales call. People can feel it. And I think that is something that isn't spoken about a ton, but it's so impactful. And we've all seen, maybe the person who doesn't take care of themselves. They're always eating the snacks. They're always making excuses to go to the gym. But what I've found is your health and your business or your sales go hand in hand with each other, because a lot of the mindsets used in the gym to go heavier on another set is the same piece of your brain that says, all right, Blake, one more call today, two more calls today. It's that same mechanism. So, I think that is great. And from your perspective as a manager, like, how do you evangelize those messages to your team, or do you even at all? It's more just on them to figure it out.
I do a little bit. My team kind of says I'm such a dad because like I'll be telling them about like some supplement I'm taking, or I'll ask people what they're having for dinner. I try not to be annoying about it, but I don't evangelize it too much. But I do try to take a pretty personal, like one-to-one take. Like when I have my one-to-ones with reps, I try to understand like how they're doing just in general in life. And if they're stressed out, I try to like tell them, hey, please prioritize your mental health. Like, yes, I know we've got a number to hit here, and it's kind of it's a tall hill to climb, but like, at the end of the day, listen, this is just a job. Like, I don't want you to wreck yourself over it. I can tell you're stressed out. Like, please go unplug for a bit. Go take a walk and, like, go get a nice meal or something. I do tell my reps to do that. I'm not always on, kind of breathing down their necks about their number. I try to be as much of a human as I can, because I've been in their shoes where, I've struggled to hit my numbers in previous roles, and I've had my manager breathing down my neck, and it sucks. So I just try to be very empathetic, and always understand where they are and how it feels to be there, and then try to tell them what I wish I would have been told in the voice that I wish I would have been, kind of talked to in. So
I love that. It's like be the person you needed back in that situation. I've heard that saying a lot, and I think it's good to, within parameters, like be that good influence for them while still hitting the company goals and everything else, because it does all go in tandem. But I guess just transitioning a bit back to, the growth the company's having and everything like that. I'm assuming you guys are probably, still going to be hiring, if not this year, early next year, and so on. Every company's a little different within, the economy. But when it comes to Blake's team and who Blake is hiring, what do you look for in those people when they're kind of moving up from, it sounds like, a sales development rep to a closer on your team?
yeah. So I am definitely looking for people that did well as an SDR, because we are a bit of a self-prospecting team. So we don't have SDRs really working for us in our segment. So you still have to be an SDR. So that's the first thing. And I really want to understand what motivates people. I think if you can have some sort of clear goal within yourself, whether it's a competitive drive or a financial motivator, you're going to get up and be consistent every week. You're not going to let a day go to waste because you have a goal in mind. So I like to talk to people that are clear about what their goals are. And I think that translates really well into sales success. And then the last thing is just setting the expectations that in this role, especially if you have a platform of products to sell, is understanding how they think they might be qualifying people and how are they going to navigate a more of a complex sales process when they're coming from just kind of setting appointments, and kind of hearing how if they've already thought about that, if they've done any work, before the interview or whatever, to kind of start building those skills. And so I think those are the main things I'm looking for. Like, we are it's a pretty young team. So I'm not expecting you to be some like 5 to 10 year like closing experience person. I know there's going to be people that are going to be green. But as long as you're coachable and you have that drive within you and that clear goal, and you are a successful SDR, I feel like, you can do well, as an AE at Darktrace.
I love that. Yeah, and something I just want to kind of double click into is when you say coachability, I think that's something people overlook a lot, just in sales and in life. A lot of the best reps, in Blake, I'm sure you can attest to this, they're the ones who are not just coachable, but they're willing to actually apply the feedback.
Yeah.
And so I think whenever you're looking for any role, sometimes and this is actually like what I've seen in my experience, is a lot of tech companies, they'll take young people who haven't already learned bad habits to a certain degree, and they'll pull them in the organization where they're still coachable, willing to apply feedback. Or sometimes if you get people too tenured in their career to kind of switch over to a different company, it could be teaching an old dog new tricks, where they're like, well, I'll join your company, but I'm not changing my philosophy. And then it just causes friction. And so I definitely wanted to highlight that, because I think it's just so important people realize that. And then when you pair that with having a drive, and it's something I would always ask in interviews as well. And then once people were onboarded on my team, we would always do, quarterly business reviews, everything like that. And clearly they're coming into that. And I'm sure you deal with it, Blake, where they're like, yes, Blake, I'm going to hit 100% of my number. I'm going to have the best metrics on the team. And the reality was, is I really appreciated it. But I'd always surprise them at the end of the QBR deck. And I'd say, what's your personal goal this quarter? Like, what are you striving for? Because whether you like it or not, like your sales goal is going to be there. Sales is an up and down game, but let's make a commitment to yourself outside of work. Can you sign up for a half marathon? Can you put some eggs in another basket to kind of stay diversified? That way it's not so work oriented. But what actually happens in that process is they start hitting goals outside of work as well. And it brings better energy back into the office. And so it's kind of this full kumbaya circle where people end up being higher performers.
It is. I agree. I mean, yeah, if you're not doing hard things outside of work and you're, like sales may not necessarily be the route for you. I feel like if like high performing salespeople have some sort of kind of obsessive edge almost about them, which I can say about myself. Like I feel like I'm constantly behind. Like I need to do better. I need to I don't know where it necessarily comes from, but I think it's like I could only ever do sales or be an entrepreneur. If I did anything else, I feel like I'd be deteriorating. And I think that's just my own personality. Like I'm a bit of a rebel. I've always been sort of a rebel. Like we talk about coachability. I haven't always been the most coachable person. And so I feel like I have to do something where my own inputs are going to get me like my rewards. Like the juice has to be worth the squeeze, or I probably won't even like work hard enough. Like if you just throw me in some operations role or like some kind of like number crunching role or something like that, where there's not a tangible goal to get to that's going to pay me, like I might do the minimum of what's required. And unfortunately, that's what I think a lot of people do. Like a lot of people kind of do the minimum of what they can do to not get fired, because that's just the nature of work. Unless you are somebody that is really going after something and either building something or trying to hit really high numbers, right? As a salesperson or as an entrepreneur. So I don't really know where I was going with that. It's just, it's true. You need to be competitive and do stuff outside of work, especially if you're in sales. It'll for sure translate to the job.
Totally. No, I couldn't agree more. And I think a nugget to kind of take out of that is tech sales, like it is a hard industry to get into. It's a hard industry to succeed. But if you're someone who's looking to grow, there's no better influencer person you can get in your life than someone who holds you to high standards. And just think of it objectively of all the people you interact with. You're going to have a million friends come into your life where they're like, hey, let's go out till midnight. Let's order that pizza. Let's do this. Let's do that. None of that's inherently bad. But when you're in tech sales at a top company like Darktrace and you're in leadership and you're getting held to high standards with good work-life balance and everything like that, that's ultimately what's going to make you the happiest when you're pushing yourself daily to really see what you are capable of. So I think you said it awesome, Blake. And I think that's something that people definitely need to hear is tech sales will push you, but with all these companies, it's kind of staggered that way with quotas and fun things to chase to keep it. All right, you perform, you put in your inputs, we're going to give you the output. And I think that's something that is just so cool because all of a sudden you set a meeting, it's for an enterprise company and it turns into a $10 million opportunity. And you're like, whoa, like I didn't realize that if I just did those inputs every day, this would happen. And I think we've probably both seen it happen within our organizations or at least to ourselves. So, but no, I know we have a tight time frame just because we both do work in corporate and kind of get our things done. But I guess to kind of wrap things up, I'm curious what's next for you. What's the vision for the team? What's next at Darktrace if everything aligns?
That's a great question, because once you get promoted into the spot like that I have now, the promotions are slower, right? So I'm not really sure. The main thing I'm thinking about right now is this next quarter. If we're being really honest, not thinking too far past that, because in my view, it's sort of just a do or die quarter. It's the end of our fiscal year. Basically, June is the last quarter, and things always change every fiscal year, whether it's team shuffling, promotions, whatever it is. And so right now, that's my near-term goal, is to close as much business as humanly possible this next quarter. And then, I really want to make sure I hit my 3-year mark at Darktrace and beyond. But really, as long as I can continue to grow in my role and not feel stagnant, and just see, a lot of success at Darktrace that's, kind of mirroring those inputs I put in every day. I'm going to ride this rocket ship, as far as I possibly can. So I wish I could give you more of a clear goal on what's next, but right now it's more kind of what's right in front of me. I hope that's not disappointing to hear.
No, no, not at all. And you never know with the tech industry, because, in a company like Darktrace, it could, hypothetically just start popping off one quarter and, things align, and you just never know what's going to happen. And to your point, Blake, you're only as good as your current quarter. So you got to stay focused on that. And that is the best mentality you can have in sales. So
Yeah.
no, I really appreciate it. I think it's so cool for people to be able to hear your story, because in a lot of ways, like, you came from outside the industry, you found your way into a fantastic company, and you essentially created your own job to a certain degree with saying, hey, I think there's an opportunity here. You're proactive, you had a bias for action, you created it, they deemed you as the appropriate person to lead this market. And I just think it's amazing what you've done. So I guess if people want to connect with you, can they connect with you on LinkedIn, or like, what's the best way if anyone wants to reach out for any questions, or I guess even potential hiring?
Yeah, I would say, LinkedIn and Twitter. I'm on both. Twitter is at Blake Arold, just as my name is spelled, no N in there, as a reminder. And same thing on LinkedIn. And yeah, we are still going to be hiring. It'll sort of depend on where you're at in the country, but I'm always happy to have a chat and, just offer any guidance that I possibly can. If you're starting out in your sales career, I'm still learning every day myself. So happy to help.
Awesome. And yeah, guys, if you're going to learn tech sales, learn from real world tech professionals who are high achievers like Blake. So definitely don't be a stranger, reach out to him. But yeah, Blake, I enjoyed our conversation today. We'll definitely keep in touch, and yeah, look forward to all your success here in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jay. Appreciate it. It was great talking.